Welcome, everybody. Day
Hi.
2 of
Hi.
Communication Talk. Thanks for being here. And yesterday we were considering, on day 1, we were considering questions of, actually I completely forgot what we were considering, but because I kind of got absorbed into what the previous session, is your signal weak or strong, with Malvika.
I think we came full circle yesterday. We spoke of the role of a mirror, and
Right,
we came
right.
back to what that mirror is and how one what we see.
Right.
Maybe you can just summarize it for Sonia and Virangana who weren't there yesterday.
Right. Let me open up the questions from yesterday. But the reason I'm bringing up, Malvika, your talk and your discussion that we were going through is because the questions for today
Yeah.
that I have are actually sort of in line with what we ended, in the sense of today I wanted to talk about noise, and
Yeah.
if there is so much noise,
Yeah.
as you know, then, and as we were talking about cynicism, and there's so much stuff.
Yeah.
And the questions I have for today are, what's the point of even adding to it? Why would anybody even want to add to it?
You're not adding. I would see it as breaking it. I mean, to use one of Prayas's favorite words, puncture. So why can't we puncture the cynicism?
Yeah, I mean, I don't claim to be a cynic. I only participate in a cynical perspective when the argument needs it. I mean,
That's convenient.
no, that's. I mean, so the cynical perspective needs to be accessible to us because it's not useless. It does offer something. Of course, being a cynic and identifying with that will make you, for all practical purposes, very unproductive and very it will make you a burden on this planet, I guess. But
wouldn't that be some kind of validation? I mean,
validation.
even in the sense, I mean, I very briefly could go through, I mean, you're part of yesterday's broadcast just now, but one thing that struck me when you're talking about mirroring, and even when you refer to this, could be the aspect of validation, even if you want to deny the fact that in some way we are all looking for a validation about where we are today, or in the world that we are in and with whom we are communicating with.
Which is why we
No, so
It's a
I
very
mean,
basic need.
I didn't get the connection with the
No,
with
even about being cynical, if you're not a cynic, the whole
yeah.
idea of whether being cynical is some kind of a validation within the situation that you're being cynical in, for you to be placed within that,
So what gets
or a kind of
valid?
mirroring in
you're
some.
just saying it as a position that you place yourself
Yeah.
in. Does cynicism bring about objectivity? Do we get more objective about ourselves or anything else if you're cynical?
I mean, I think being accessing the cynical perspective at least helps you point towards the reasons for not being able to talk. You know, so when I'm really at a stage when no conversation is possible with you, then I need to be able to access the cynical perspective and tell you, okay, these are the reasons why I can't talk to you. And that might seem like being a cynic, but you're just using that material from that perspective, which is almost a standard perspective. It's like, to be cynical doesn't require uh, any skill as such. Maybe it just requires you to diss everything.
Disbelief.
Yeah.
So all of the questions today that Satya's put up come from that point of view. It sounds like that because one is in all this noise, why speak? In all this noise, who is heard? And if it is all noise, why not speak?
Exactly. And the other thing which I want to say is that you're saying that it's the default position, Prayas, like of being cynical. On the other hand, there is also the default position of believing everything you hear, because I feel like being cynical is being able to take a different perspective, to step back and see what could be, what could various possibilities be, and
Yeah,
therefore not seeing what is at face value.
yeah,
And so,
definitely. I mean,
right,
I think it's very useful to access the cynical perspective while
I
still not being a cynic, because
agree.
I think being a cynic is just about something else.
But a cynical perspective is very hard. It's very yeah. It's I don't see it. It's so inflexible.
I think it's actually very flexible in the sense like you are open to various possibilities. Um, there
Yeah, and
is
it
the
allows you
possibility
to
that
bring
at
in
face
your
value. Sorry, go ahead.
it allows you to bring in your personal angst, so like everything we talk about, if you want to talk about objectivity, then it's talking about ideas in a very dry, distant format, which is not realistic. The fact that we are talking about them means that we are involved, and we need to, so we can't let the messiness of being us, we can't keep that away from this discussion. I mean, that mess is part of the discussion because we are in the discussion.
So if I tell
Yes,
you a
and
story, will you look at it? Will you? Are you saying that you choose a cynical perspective because it helps you see it better? So if I tell you a story, are you going to believe the story, but at the same time disbelieve it?
that's how I look at things. I mean, the thing is, I feel like for communication, and especially when there is so much noise, when everybody is telling stories,
Yeah.
how do you know where are you, which, I mean, which story? What angle of the story? Like, which one is true? Which one? There's no way to know this. And therefore, for me personally, the way I would approach it is to analyze it from different angles. And there is nothing like personal in that, in the sense like this is X being told to me.
Yeah.
What are the various contexts that X is
If you,
inhabiting?
if you have to link it to the previous discussion, if I'm
Uh-huh.
looking at languages communication, I'll be looking at noise in as opposing language, and if communication is something that's coherent, is noise something that's incoherent, and something that is noise a language, is noise communication.
Excellent way to put it. The way I was looking at noise is incoherence, and it is a profusion of attempts at communication, a profusion of languages, and all of them coming together at the same point, all of them all present. And the question I had, in all this noise, what's the point of even speaking? If
Okay. Would it be to sift through the noise when there's so much noise, to pin down noise so that there's some sort of coherence within the noise rather than creating more noise?
right, would you say that comes from a personal need?
No, it's just a question. It's a question.
Okay, and I guess the way I'm responding to that is thinking aloud in terms of, if I want to sift through the noise, why do I want to do that?
Because you want to find the silence even within the noise.
But don't I want to be heard?
Um, your silence can be heard.
But there's so much noise, and the currency is noise.
Then you
Then
have to, if the silence can be loud enough, then it'll break the noise.
does it? And that's my fundamental question.
I think it does. It does, because there've been a lot of people who talk of how they can be in the middle of a busy, bustling market and still feel completely connected with themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of situations where a circumstance of extreme impact or extreme stimulus from every
Right.
sensory you know possibility.
Like a sensory
Sometimes
overload.
it is like complete sensory overload. Sometimes it in that kind of extreme situation, something just shocks you into finding something beautiful there.
And it's also probably, in a way, the way you extract yourself from that noise is what silence would do. And how you'd have to look at it from the outside to know that you've been able to break that noise.
But Satya, isn't one of the things that you're talking about is the possibility of enjoying noise?
Right. I mean, surfing noise. I hadn't thought about that actually. I wasn't going in that direction, and that's an interesting thing to think about, I think. Um, because accepting the noise and just surfing on top of it, that'd be fun.
Yeah, because I think beauty and silence and all of these would I would think of them initially at at the first point as popular cultural prescriptions that what do you do in life, you search for beauty, right? So
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that can't possibly be true.
You are not talking from a cynical perspective. You are just a cynic.
No. No, I mean, no, I mean, I don't. No, no. I mean, it's
But it's a way of
if I
taking
am
a
if I am a cynic, it's okay. I mean, I don't have too much of a problem in being a cynic. I don't. I mean, I'm just saying it. If being a cynic is, if it's helping in the discussion right now and taking it somewhere,
Oh,
then
definitely.
I can be a cynic. If it's not helping, then you can. I mean, then we can talk about that.
I mean, I think it does help in this situation, to me at least, because if there is noise and there is so much of it, and if I keep quiet, as Virangna said about silence giving perspective to the noise, then I step back, then it's showing me something new, it's showing me new constructs of what the noise is. In a way, that is a sort of cynicism because I'm not believing the noise, I'm stepping away from it, I'm looking at it.
Right.
So I'm actually, I feel like I have an answer for this. In all this noise, why speak? Yeah, don't speak. Just keep quiet and watch. The other second question I had there is, in all this noise, who is heard?
Depends on who is listening.
Right. But if you are listening, who are you hearing?
I guess it depends on how well you can listen
And what do you choose to
and,
listen to?
and what you can recognize
And the
what
frequency that
symbols.
differs the most.
The frequency that differs the most. So it is cut through somehow.
I mean, that's when you'll really be heard. If there's so much noise and everybody is going along with that frequency, it's something that has to be that different where you can cut through that.
But sometimes it might not be a different frequency. It might just be an aesthetic where you like, even though it's not very different from the other frequencies, we just have a tendency to appreciate that particular symbol within that noise. And then you see that that's interesting, and then you look for the patterns and you listen harder, you try and listen harder. And I don't know, exploring here.
There's, I think when it comes to frequencies, different, and like Sonia says, you are tuned to different frequencies. Different people hear different things.
Right.
And what may stand out for one person, may another person can be completely oblivious to.
And what if you are silent? Then will you be heard?
When there's a lot of noise, I think the silence will be the difference, and I do believe it will be noticed.
But Malvika, don't you think that's a romantic notion? Because this whole notion that you just do your thing and
Right.
you'll be found, and I find that very.
No, I'm not saying you will be found. Even if you're not found, it doesn't matter. You just do your thing.
Yeah, but if the equivalent of not being found is silence, right? It's you're not heard.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you're saying that, so then not being heard doesn't affect you.
Right.
It ideally it shouldn't.
Why shouldn't it affect you?
For the same reasons that noise shouldn't affect.
Right. Actually, it's because it's a separate thing. It is not about the noise, or it is not about being heard or not heard. It is about something altogether different, which is doing.
Yeah, because I think being heard is about uh, it's about valuing. It's about valuing the other too much. It's about okay, someone is even there to hear.
Right.
So you're even picturing that there is any possibility of hearing,
Right.
which is a problem. I mean, because I think what one needs to be concerned about in a way is how do I get to say what I want to say.
And that's the thing. If you are not being heard, and if that makes you not want to say, there is a.
But why would it?
Right. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. Ideally, it shouldn't.
In the same vein, if there is noise and there is no receiver, then you're not being heard too. Like, I mean,
Right.
the creator of the noise is not being heard if there is no receiver.
That's
Right.
true. That's
And I
true.
think when there's that much noise and everybody is trying to say their own thing, it's all about the satisfaction of having to say something or speak, and then you sort of stop caring about whether anybody's even listening to you because you've said your thing. And in
Right.
some way that becomes a secondary importance.
Right. Right. And that actually is the third question. Where in all this noise, why not speak? It's like, yeah, everybody's speaking, but it's not about the noise. It's about the act of speaking.
Because the act of speaking makes you something after you've spoken, right? So after you speak something, you become something which is a person with a history of having spoken something.
So my question now is then history. Like, is this about validation? I mean, does it mean that you are something only if you have a history?
No, you at least have a history at any point of what you have said yourself. So
Sometimes, I'm wondering, I think that sometimes noise need not necessarily be speech. It could even be a laughing clubs, for instance, where it is equivalent to an outlet rather than it being deliberate and meaning something.
Noise can be anything. It can be, a room filled with a lot of things.
Yes.
Right.
Noise can be just sound. It can be a city. It can be, and why people say silence can also be deafening.
Right. There could be an oppressive amount of silence which
Yeah.
needs, then your ear needs a change.
But I think there, in that sense, when you say there's an oppressive silence, it's very focused. I think noise, we can differentiate as not having focus. Would I be right in imagining that?
I mean,
yeah,
I feel
there's no larger design.
Yeah,
Does noise have pattern?
Yeah, there is no pattern.
there's no pattern. It's
noise
random.
could have, no, I think noise could have pattern in terms of, actually, I think
The moment
way-
you're seeing pattern, you're listening.
but no, I'm not listening. Suppose nobody's listening, but there's a whole bunch of, and to bring back cynicism again, there is a certain message that is being crafted by the loudest voices, and those are being said that this is how there are so many sounds that are coming all together, and envelope of that noise is being crafted by some of the loudest voices. So
But Satya, to even recognize that, one will need to listen and pay attention.
which
No,
is fine, but
to
I'm
find
saying,
patterns in noise, wouldn't you have to either slow down noise or look at it at a different scale than the one that is being broadcast at?
so suppose you detach yourself from it. You're not even a listener, you're not even a speaker, you're just observing it. You're looking at what this noise is.
I think that's the only way you can comprehend it, because the moment you're in that noise, you're a part of it itself. You have to look at it from the outside to be able to recognize that pattern or to even comprehend the noise.
Right, and what I'm saying is, like, when you have detached yourself and you see that the noise itself has, like, for instance, right now being bombarded by messages of a certain kind, which you don't agree with, but you're getting those messages anyway. So on this particular day, the 21st of June in India, so it's like, to me, that is noise as well, in the sense I'm getting all these messages that are unwanted. Noise is unwanted. So in that sense, there is a focus to it.
Of not being wanted.
Of not being wanted.
See, if you zoom into the noise, you can pick and perhaps classify and categorize as this is noise because it's not wanted, this is noise because I'm not interested, this is noise because it's a different something else. But the fact that they are all operating at the same time and it is doing nothing for you in any way is what makes it noise, I think.
Right, so I'm getting overwhelmed by all these things that are hitting me.
Yeah.
No, but that is just that being overwhelmed just speaks about that just speaks about the fact that your capacity needs to be expanded.
That's
And that
true.
the noise is penetrating. I mean, you haven't extracted yourself from it.
Yeah, I mean, so the messages might be perfectly innocent and sincere, let's say, that they want to let you know that this is happening,
Right.
and
But
you need to know. But because your capacity may be built around what what your general workflow is. You don't need to receive so many messages usually.
But what if you just cannot shut down the receiving mechanism? I mean, whatever you do, it's going to be washed over by this. Whatever you say, whatever you're listening to is going to be washed over by all this other noise. You didn't invite it, but it's there.
No, I mean, I was just trying to not really make a pointed thing comment on your capacity, as trying to hint at the fact that noise might actually be our our learning gap in terms of in terms of seeking patterns in information, right? So let's say I can't deal with 20,000 people on my timeline on Facebook. Now that's my limitation.
That's one way of looking at it. Uh, is it a limitation though? I mean, I think it's a strength.
No, because I find that some people really are able to, if they need to, if they want to, they are able
Right.
to parse large bodies of information very efficiently, and not feel overwhelmed by it.
But
I
then,
mean, yeah.
is that desirable?
I
How is
think
it
it's about the
different?
filter you create for yourself. It's a very personal view on that.
Right.
Because it's about how much you allow to permeate into you, how much you allow that noise to disturb you, and how much you actually block out, no matter how close it is to you.
But I mean that links in some way to what we were talking about yesterday in the third study group, the inviting witness thing. So all these filters, all these let's say aren't they defense mechanisms? So we are trying to limit what is able to reach us, because if everything reaches us, it will unsettle us at least.
Okay.
And what is it that we why is it that we don't want to be unsettled?
Sure, that's definitely one way to go through. I mean, I do see value in letting in a lot of noise and being in a state which is not normal to somebody. If you're not comfortable, it's always good. There's probably scope for something new to enter there. I could see value in that. So opening yourself up to the noise might actually be useful. I could see that.
I mean,
What I
that's only. I mean, I'm only thinking about that at this point because uh, by living in a way that is in a very carefully constructed set of filters and all of that,
Mhm.
I've not seen that. I've not seen that having any inherent way of expanding, let's say, itself, right? So it becomes a very comfortable space after a point, and that again becomes disturbing.
See,
Yeah,
that's
but
precisely what I recognize in what is happening with languages.
okay.
Because you like you create these filters and you become comfortable. You choose these familiar milestones or whatever, these landmarks, and then you start using or moving within only those, or you recognize only those, and you start communicating with just those, and that becomes your comfort.
Sure. I mean, but then what I'm trying to say is if you're constructed in such a way that you're not optimized for having, suppose you're a nail that's thrown into a tank, you will sink. It's your nature to sink. But if you're a feather, you'll float. I mean, what I'm saying is, letting
So,
in,
what is the problem? I mean, why would you compare sinking to floating? So, if you sink, you may have other advantages of sinking.
right, that's what
You
I'm saying.
may know
So,
what the bottom is like.
exactly, that's exactly right. So, being overwhelmed or not, that there is nothing positive or negative about that. I mean, what
Right.
I'm saying is that there isn't a comfort zone. The comfort zone could be breached by that nail in a different manner, but the noise might be an unwanted distraction.
But would you have got to that point of breaching the comfort zone without the noise?
And I'm saying that maybe there is a different way it would have reached that breaching point had there not been that noise. So I'm not disagreeing that there is a movement from the comfort zone. I do agree there is, but is it a desirable movement or not is what I'm questioning.
Um, I don't know.
Yeah. um, we have sort of established that there is some merit to being in the noise. And the other thing which I also wanted to say was the capacity for, like Prayas, to your earlier point of the amount of noise that comes through. Like some people are able to handle a lot of messages on their mobile or whatever. But again, that's subjective because for somebody, two messages might be too much, and for somebody, 20,000 might be too much. So it seems to be
Yeah,
like a
I mean, I think that calibration should be more of a choice and not, I mean, and not be so much of a hitting the limit of one's capacity, you know. So I might be able to deal with 20,000 messages, but might be wanting to deal with only two.
right, right.
And I mean, so and those two are, I think, I mean, I don't know. That's, I'm not saying I'm there. I'm just saying I would like to be able to calibrate this in the sense that not live with, not try to rationalize or narrativize the limits that I end up with, you know. But more than that, maybe try to, because parsing the noise has its own. I mean, that's where the gold is.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
there is new information and which could not have been accessible. I mean, everyone is expressing. There is so much expression. There is so much scope for inviting new things in.
Yeah,
From that,
that's where the sentiment of the time lives, right? So if you want to understand this time, where does the sentiment of this time live? It lives in the noise that this time produces.
right. And the more it is producing, the more there is a chance of sifting through it and trying to get a grip on what it is.
Yeah, so it's not in our interest to actually protect ourselves from it.
What would it be like to be on the fringes?
And the fringe means where you are sort of
You
protecting in a
can,
way.
yeah, you can hear the noise, but you can also
Yeah,
not hear it.
the silence. Yeah,
You're seeing what it's not
right.
creating.
And that seems to be the cynical perspective.
Being on the fringe?
In a way, right? Like you're able to see what the noise is, you're able to also see what it is not, or
Yeah,
what it
yeah.
means to me. Yeah. I mean, you may not have a complete grip on what you're seeing, but at least you're on the edge.
But how do you know where the edge is?
That's true. And we don't even know what silence is anymore. I mean, what is silence?
Apparently, the earth also causes a hum that only few people can hear.
Yeah.
No, that's a myth actually. It doesn't.
Really?
Yeah, it's a myth. I've looked it up. It doesn't make it sound. When sound can't travel through space, basically. No, it needs a medium to travel. So it's a
Yes,
myth that
that's
it
true.
makes a hum.
Yeah, it can't possibly do that.
It's interesting to talk about medium because currently there is a lot of media for the sound to travel, at least on Earth.
I thought
There's
it was produced from within.
And it may not be sound waves per se, it might be some other sort of radiation. Is that something you might have seen new?
I don't know of radiation, but it doesn't make a hum while it revolves around its own axis. Is what the myth says that it does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay.
But I mean, if you look at it conceptually, like if there is nothing like silence. So there is always some kind of a baseline. There's a background radiation in the universe or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, what you think is silence is only a frequency of sound that you haven't learned to listen to.
That's one way of looking at it. Yeah, that's true because if I look at it like that, then even the noise that happens, like what I'm terming as sounds and noise, there are certain frequencies which I just don't know how to hear it. You know, the capacity that you talked about, there are the 20,000 people coming in. I'm just not able to hear beyond 5.
Yeah, and as a musician, you must be actually having your own way of looking at this because, I mean, I have thought about this at some point that when you are creating music, you're only, of course, consciously dealing with the frequencies, a set of frequencies that you can hear, but then, of course, what is also being put out are a set of frequencies that you can't shape, right? You can't do anything about them.
Right, that is very true. And there's a whole bunch of loss because the way, when you're writing music at least, what you hear and what comes out are absolutely very different. And that's true for any art form. But I think I had read something at some point where you have to not speak for a very long time when you're composing. In the sense, you keep listening. There is something that you're listening to first before even articulating it. If you immediately jump into trying to speak, you may not be speaking what you actually want to say, what you're hearing. I mean, assuming that speaking what you are hearing is desirable.
But that gives us a very maybe that's something which you can put on a poster and kind of post it because
that's in fact, Prayas, that seems like what you were talking of in the last discussion of conscious construction. that you
No,
can't
no,
just.
I got something else from this. What I got from this was that what you're trying to say is that the boundaries of sound, right? Right?
Uh-huh.
In the
Mm-hmm.
sense, when you speak, the where it ends and where it starts are not known. That those boundaries are not known. So you need to cushion it or buffer it with enough silence for it to even be for it to even mean what you meant. Is that what he said?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I'm intending to say something, but if I don't make the effort to listen to what I'm intending to say before I say it, it will not come out as true to what it was intended to be. So I'd really have to not
But
speak
isn't
until
that
the.
self-consciousness?
And that's the thing about it. And that's the thing. It can become self-consciousness, but you have to not let it. I don't know, but there's a way to do it. You are not
It
conscious.
sounds very zen.
It does actually. It does. I mean, uh, it's like you have. It's. I don't know. Even as a visual artist, you might have this where you have something inside where you know you want to say this, right? But if you say it too soon, you have not said it. I mean, maybe it was fully formed and you said it, but if you didn't take the time to listen, then what are you saying? And then we are talking about the boundary of the sound and the silence and the sound. We're talking about that boundary now.
Yeah. So
Though of
maybe
course,
that's the boundary between the noise and the silence too.
exactly,
Because we are
exactly.
all contributing to the noise, and when we don't act,
Yeah, yeah. When we don't act, yeah, we don't act until it is natural,
yeah.
and therefore there is some merit to not speaking.
So coming back to your third question, why speak? No, why not speak? So you
Right.
only speak if you really have something to say.
That's true. That's true.
Is it some
Ideally,
sort
yeah.
of biblical commandment?
Well, ideally, yes, but some people also speak just because they feel they need to be heard, even if they don't have anything to say.
Right.
It's a sort of a rambling which goes on, and that in some way also adds to the noise. I mean, bringing us back to speaking within the noise only because you feel you need to speak without reason.
But do you think that in a more absurd fashion that you can find sense through a rambling?
But then it could just be superficial rambling with no substance behind it.
With, I mean, I'm not saying everybody would do that, but with some who may feel that that rambling in some way becomes a validation
Right.
to contribute to the noise around them.
That makes sense. Like there's a perceived value attached to a person who's speaking,
In the
and
sense,
there's that whole discussion around extroverts and introverts at work, where in the corporate American milieu, where person who speaks is given a certain amount of power over a person who does not speak. And that's also some of the things that I consider about in terms of noise, like in the sense of if you're not speaking, what is the value, Do you have to speak in order to be attributed value? But of course, you have to want to have value.
yeah.
You'll have value because you'll be closer to the edge because you're not speaking.
That is true. That is true. And then the value is apparent, probably. If it is apparent to yourself, then that's probably desirable.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up at this point.
So we
I
should.
mean, sorry, I just wanted to, I mean, that last thing which you were saying, which so about speaking, else you will not be assigned any value.
Uh-huh.
So, doesn't that also include the question of context and actually also content, in the sense, so you can speak, but what do you speak and when do you speak?
That's true.
So, because if you're going to just speak, then you might be able to figure it out. I mean, that you are applying your voice to language and you're going to say something.
So basically, doing the act of speaking has an inherent value of. So you're saying basically there is a value to articulating or vocalizing.
No, I'm saying that more than the value of articulating or vocalizing might be the value of when and what you articulate and vocalize.
That is true. Yeah, that does make
So,
sense.
yeah, so in that sense, it's just because, let's say, corporate environments are incapable of dealing with content, right? So
Right,
they
right. And
just,
there are very specific structures. I mean, it may not be applicable in this situation in a holistic sense, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, in the sense, they will just have a set of checklists that, okay,
Yeah.
did you speak in the last 6 months in a public meeting? Yes, no. So but they don't really have a way of understanding. Or if you did speak,
Yeah,
what was the impact of your speaking?
definitely. I mean, the metrics that are used are quite questionable in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the reason why in academic conferences we have people asking questions that they actually don't want to be answered. I mean, they will just ask questions to sound smart enough to have thought of that question in the first place.
Right, right. Which is very interesting because that's another. It's like, what is the value of the words that have been spoken within the context?
Yeah, so I think in the whole, if we don't stay at the articulation value of speaking and
Uh-huh.
zoom in into the content or context value, uh,
Right.
it might help the discussion in the sense,
So if we zoom
because
in the content and context value.
yeah, and not the act of speaking, because the act of speaking, let's say, has been hacked. People know that, okay, speaking is going to make us look like like we are able to think of speaking, at
So,
least.
but what you're saying is that to continue the discussion with the assumption that speech has to be done.
Continue the discussion that continue the discussion with the fact that more important than the pressure of producing speech is
Uh-huh.
the pressure of figuring out when and what in to produce speech, how to actually do it,
Right.
when are you going to say something and what are you going to say. So
Right, right, right.
if you
And
think
actually,
about
that's it.
that,
Right. And that's very cool that you say that because that leads directly into the questions for day three, which is the very
huh,
first question for day three is how do you know what to say, when to say it?
hmm.
That's I'm really glad that you brought that up because it's an
Yeah, because
interesting.
in the living in the let's say we've been talking about noise so much today, but living in the noise of the internet, someone
Yeah.
is uploading something every nanosecond maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So they have already figured out the where the upload but how the upload button works.
Right, 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 right.
And let's say we have figured out how the start broadcast button works.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I honestly don't have anything more to say today. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you everyone for
Okay,
joining.
thanks.
And
Thank you.
Thank you.
in 15 minutes, Prayas will anchor Inviting Weakness. So please join. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thanks
I
for joining.
pasted the link in the chat.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's good. Everyone has it then. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.